disdain, throw it away, and they might just pick up everything else. But it's the active ingredient. Oh, you're recording the call right now?
Yeah, because, I mean, I just wanted to, I have no idea what we're talking about. I also kind of want to bring up something else, probably going to embarrass Diana, but so I don't know if you know that Diana's husband hurt himself on the job. He does tree work, and he fell out of a tree, like he was 35 feet up, and he landed, I don't know how he landed, but he broke the ribs connecting to his spinal column. Thank God it wasn't a spinal column. And he's self-employed, and he's out of work. Like, he can't work. So, like, we're taking up a donation. So I posted it in the chat and everything else. But, I mean, if anybody that's on the call, you feel like, even anything will help. Just go to the chat, and her PayPal is there. And feel free to give. I'm sure the Father will bless you for doing it.
That's a horrible thing.
Yeah. So Diana would never ask herself, nor would Jim.
Thanks for that.
So anyway, I'm just going to shut off the camera and let you go. I'll see you in about 40 minutes.
Sure. You want to open with a...
Oh, yeah. I guess we got to pray. Sorry about that. Somebody else feel like praying? There's Paul Barry. Sally O'Malley.
Shalom. Okay. Baruch atah Yahuwah Avinu. Shabbat Shemayim. Thank you for the wonderful Shabbat you've provided us with. Thank you for every provision, every blessing that comes from your Shabbat. Thank you for this day. Thank you for gathering us together. And thank you for blessing Eric with your Ruach HaKadosh and the seed of your word. Thank you for every purpose of your seed and your word going forth this day. May we receive it and take to heart every word. That there would be some good soil for your seed to be planted in, and fruit, living fruit, honoring you, doing good. Hallelujah, Yahuwah. Thank you for your name restored. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen.
And P.S. Yahweh Rapha, for Diana King's husband, heal him.
Yes, hallelujah.
Our healer, and we put him into your hands and care, and recover him quickly and thoroughly, please. Shem Yahusha.
Hallelujah.
So I was just talking about the MCU and this new show that they have, Moon Knight. I don't know anything about this comic book character, but I was watching it, and they have two characters in it. And one of them holds somebody's hand, and he's got this cane that rocks back and forth in his hand while he's holding another person's hand. And he's got a tattoo of a scale on his arm. And the scale is almost, it looks like Mishpat and Zadika. And it seems like every time I watch something from the MCU, they're representing something that we know in Torah, except for the Shabbat. They don't talk about the Shabbat. So it almost looks confusing, as if these other religions in the world, they call them fables or myths or whatever, know something of Scripture, but it's polluted. It's close, but it's different. And they don't know the name of Yahuwah. So there you go.
So the subject this week is Psalms 33, and somebody had mentioned, I don't remember who it was, but somebody had mentioned one of the verses in the comments. So just so you know, people who make comments on the videos, I really try to look at them and acknowledge them. And sometimes the comments come in weeks or months or even sometimes a number of years later by the time I ever see them in some of the older videos. And every time I see one, I try to respond, at least hitting a like. But so anyway, because somebody mentioned something from Psalm 33, I started looking at the chapter. So that's what we're going to talk about. There happens to be 22 verses. And one of the things we've done with the map, Daniel 12 last week with Exodus 20, is correlate each concept or each phrase, or in this case, perhaps each verse to the letter sequence. Now, if you look close at Psalm 34 in the Hebrew, it's broken into sections where they'll put at least in Stone's Tanakh, small little aleph, then they'll make a statement, and then the bet. And sometimes when they do that, it's because the first letter of the first word starts with that letter. They did that in Proverbs 31 about the Ashat Chayil, which is translated as the virtuous woman, or the military fire is another way you could take those two. But the point is, there's no such correlation with existing letters in the words to Psalms 33. But because there happens to be 22 verses, it's like, well, we could look at that as a secondary consideration. But as a primary consideration, has nothing to do with the fact there's 22 verses and correlating them to the 22 letters. But the reason I did that over the last couple of weeks was to encourage people to think in terms of 22-letter alphabet, as if that was the secret code, the unknown but encrypted key to everything that Yahuwah put into the universe, built everywhere if you could see it, but we can't see it. We don't know anything about it. So therefore, it's not known. Something is known. So you get something like exactly what Kurt was talking about these Marvel comic book superhero characters grabbing a hold of elements. Now, why, if you have a total fantasy storybook character, why would they necessarily grab a hold of balanced scales of justice and say that that has something to do with anything? Well, because there's certain principles that might ring true. And so even when you're making a Hollywood movie, you want it to resonate with truth, some aspect or degree of truth, to capture people's fascination. And whether it's a Judeo-Christian base, or say it's what we might call Oriental, in which case there's Buddhist and Taoist and Shinto, and there's many, you might say, religious or philosophical perspectives from the Orient, as well as from the what you could call the Occidental or the Western Greco-Roman. There's the Viking lore to the north that have their runes, R-U-N-E-S, which are the letters that mean something. I mentioned before, it's just a curious thing that one of their, it's an insult to call them a comic book character, but let's just say it's that, because if there's no other Elohim, then only Yahuwah is the one and only supreme. El Elyon means, translated, God Most High. El, to be the A-L, as in translated the word God, Aleph Lamed, and then Elyon, Ayin Lamed, Yod Vav Nun. Well, Yod Vav Nun is the suffix, and Ayin Lamed means to raise up or ascend or promote or prosper. And if we talked about last week, well, when I was with Stu with Mountaineer 7, he said, why do I write Yahusho in the writing instead of Yeshua or Yeshua? Well, it's because the A sound is the phonetic that we give the ayin, but the O is actually the place in the alphabetic order. In English, L-M-N-O-P-Q. Well, in Hebrew, there's a Samach and a Zadi plugged in, but other than that, it's basically Mem, Nun, Samach, Ayin, Pei, Zadi. Anyway, just let me know if it's off. I'm trying to hold it directly on. Anyway, my point is, the ayin is this scales of balance, and so I'm trying to get my mind back on the track of thought. So going back to the comic book hero sort of thing, there's something built into humanity. If this word, this alphabetic 22-letter sequence, going back to John 1:1 and Genesis 1, if in the beginning he built a word, then with this word he spoke and projected everything. There's a verse in Psalms 33 here that mentions that as well, that by the Dabar Yahweh, by the word of Yahweh, were the heavens created. And the word heaven in Hebrew is Shem Mem, Shin Mem Yod Mem, and Shin Mem literally is name or place, location, situation, essence, identity. So you could say that we translate it, the heavens were created, but it's kind of saying everything that is, that has an identity, that has a distinct essence, one from another, was all determined and placed and built, choreographed according to these letters. So the study of these letters is the secret key, the secret code, but the essence, whether or not you can identify the particular, the essence of what's in these letters is in every human consciousness, because we're all a manifest, an expression of these 22 letters in human form. Anyway, if you look at, say, Hollywood movies or any movie, there's an essential type to Hollywood movies as opposed to, say, foreign films. And if you try to get the feeling of what that is, it's I usually try to reference things not to put people or organizations down, but to give a reference of an ideological format or paradigm. Just so you know, people think that I insult others, and I'm really endeavor to try to not do that. So if you feel insulted, please don't take it personally, but might say, well, why does it seem insulting? But anyway, so when you look at movies, they're trying to project either an ideal world. Let's imagine if such and such could happen, or there's a kind of a historical or a documentary perspective to saying, why does things happen like this on the face of the earth? Excuse me, I in the wind yesterday and got a little throat thing. There's this built-in cry, a need, craving for justice. Justice, the demand, the hope, the quest. Gosh, there was a film I recommend to people, Jean de Flore, French word. And you watch that movie, French words with English subtitles, saw it like 35 years ago. And at the end of the first movie, it's about 3 hours long. It's like, gosh, is there no justice? Why is there no justice on this planet? You watch the second movie, it's the sequel, Manna of the Spring. Happens to be manna is a Hebrew word. Some Hebrew stuff plays into it. And you think, oh, man, perhaps the justice is too severe. You have to see both movies. If you only watch one, you'll miss the whole point. Watch those two, Jean de Flore, Manna of the Spring. It's not a Hollywood film. It doesn't flow. There's no gunfights and car chases, but the human angst, the pathos, gosh, it's gripping. Cry for justice. So what does it take? Yahweh says, and again, I keep forgetting, I think it's in Psalms, might be Proverbs, but it says that Mishpat and Zadokah are the foundation of Yahuwah's throne. The foundation. It's built, it's established. And if we pray for his kingdom to come and his will to be done, justice is showing up. There was a fellow who did a sermon, I can't remember his name, but he had the role, or the, as he denoted it, the office, almost like a prophetic office, of calling for justice, the balancing of scales. And he said it was a tough job. This is 5 years ago or something. Wanted to hand the mantle on to somebody else, but he could call for justice and stuff would happen to people. Their own way, coming back on their own head, is what would happen. And so there's this superhero character that there's something about inside that makes us want that. But what would it look like if it really showed up? One question. But what would it take for it to show up? What if there's something we could do, some expression of words we could speak and say, that all of a sudden Yahuwah would say, okay, I'm showing up with me and my entourage, heavenly hosts, as a vote. I'm going to set up my throne. When a king captured a city, he typically would set his throne in the gate, bring everybody to him, and the people guilty of crimes would be dealt with. So if Yahuwah's going to do the same thing, we're going to pray, and he's going to bring his judgment and justice, hey Mark, to the earth. Excuse me. And what would that take? Well, based on human history, which is just to say, if we look back over the centuries, as much as there's fake news today, there's fake history from yesterday, but philosophies and religions over the course of years have tried to figure out what's going on and how do we get there? How do we pull him into bringing Mishpat? And that's what Psalms 33 is about, but I was just going to set this up for a few minutes first. So there was a fellow named Thomas Jefferson and a few others that are called the Founding Fathers of America in the late 1700s that I heard had a deist view. So the word deist, D-E-I, is similar to T-H-E-O, theo, which is similar to D-I-O, Dio in Spanish, all means God. But the deist philosophy, as I understand it, means that the creator God built the universe, set it in motion, and then just sits back and watches it as entertainment. He doesn't get involved. So people that believe that or determine that look at things and say, why should a man walking in the ways and believing in his heart the ways of Yahuwah and trying to love him and love his neighbors himself, why should he fall out of a tree 30 feet and get busted up? It's just not right. It's not fair. It's not equitable justice. And so the deists look at that and say, you can pray all you want, but obviously God does not intervene in human affairs. And so therefore, when you have a battle, a war, the guy with the most men, with the most surprise, who gets there first with the advantage of terrain, has the best intel on the other guys, probably going to win. That's just what happens. There's various factors, and you try to stack the deck in your favor if you're in a military engagement, but it looks like whoever created this place doesn't get involved. That's the deist view. We mentioned something about Calvinism the other day. John Calvin of the Presbyterian origins of the Presbyterian Church had this idea of predestination, which means everything's predetermined. Fatalist, you might say, but what it basically means that somebody else wrote the script, worked out all the characters, all the narrative, and we are just floating along, bumping into things that have already been pre-written, predetermined, predestined, and that we really have nothing to say or even ask. I was talking to an old man at the church when I was a kid one time. I was a teenager, 20-something, 30-something maybe. And the subject of prayer came up. And he said, well, the only thing that happens is what's supposed to happen, predestined. I said, well, then why do you pray? And he says, prayer doesn't change anything. He told us to pray, so we pray out of obedience, out of, you want to hear our voice praying, fine. But whatever's predestined is what's going to happen. Okay, he lived his life. The guy was probably in his 80s or 90s. He lived his life, having come to that conclusion for how many years. And that's the way he, in his heart, figured, calculated, was resigned to say, okay, whatever God's going to do, God's going to do. I'll pray because he tells me to pray, but my heart can't be there because that has nothing to do with anything. I say this because this is all in reference to Psalms 33. Another aspect of what people think is going on in the universe is sorcery. We would throw it in the realm of witchcraft or magic, incantations, where humans can learn the secret formula, the secret key, manipulate these words. That's why the phrase casting spells is because you spell words. You speak certain words, poof, and something happens. And we've talked before about the phrase barakada bara. It's Hebrew. It can mean, Father, make it so just as you said, or it can be taken as I speak, it should be manifest. One puts the request of the power to make something happen, appealing to Abba, and the other one puts the power and effect in your own, you might say, effect. Which is to say, then, prayer is another thing. So humans, some people say prayer is simply asking for a divine intervention, but I've heard many teachings that humans can invoke or command angels or demons to intervene. Some people have what they call prayer arrows, where you can, in your mind, target an individual that you think is your antagonist, your enemy, and speak things to that person, and they seem to happen. I've heard of people who are involved with the dark side, you might say, and they send demonic involvement to other people. Does that really happen? They think it really happens. And I heard one person say that even the people involved in witchcraft know there's rules to the game and the engagement, where you can't just take authority over a demon and say, hey, Mr. Jones, and say that's the name of the demon, you go and harass that guy over there, make him fall out of a tree. They're not allowed to do that, in the sense that if there is no reason for that guy, that person who's the target has put a target on their own back, the demon has no authority to go mess with that person. And if the person doing the witchcraft sends that demon, it'll turn around and come back and haunt or get the person doing the sending. So, they know there's rules. They say, who makes up these rules? Well, we know that Yahuwah himself made up all the rules for the way that humans operate, for the way that invisible things operate. Even demons and angels are fit to his rules. Gosh. So I heard somebody the other day say, we know the devil rules this world. Wait a minute. If you think that this world belongs to the devil, the prince of the power of the air, or just whoever, whatever, because Adam gave it to him. See, that's this paradigm of consciousness that I've heard it taught for probably thousands of times over the last 67 years. And if you believe that the devil rules this world, that sets up a perspective and an expectation. But I remember learning Psalms 24 that starts off, King James, saying, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein, because he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. That's almost exactly what a little bit of the phrasing of Psalm 33 is that we'll look at probably the second hour here. But my point is saying, if the world, the earth, the universe belongs to Yod He Vav He, Yahuwah, its fullness, and everybody and everything, demons, angels, animals, plants, fish, birds, there's no place for the devil owning it, ruling it. So if David was right, that entire ideology that the devil runs this place, owns this place, gets to make up the rules and gets to command is wrong, is a lie, a distortion. Not only is it not true, but if you believe it, you become subject to his authority because it's not true. And any perspective then that you try to get on how to pull Yahuwah's attention to your affairs, your life, you need healing, is wrong, disoriented, and won't happen the way it should. These things are really significant. Another perspective is that everything is a blend, a random combination. So when something happens, it's like, hey, what do you know about that? Hey, look what just happened. Or, oh, why did that happen? I don't know. Maybe the stars were in alignment. So when people turn to astrology and think that if the planets are in conjunction, if this is a particular time of the year or certain phase of the constellations, then they should do this or that. And it's like, sure, Yahuwah ordered the stars, but there's a verse that said he ordered them. It seems like what it's saying. He said he ordered the stars in the universe to bamboozle the heathens. That's a paraphrase of a translation. Meaning what he said was, listen, he put within the human heart, the human essence, a craving for justice. But then he's going to allow, is my understanding, He's going to allow things like the order of the stars, the appearance of, he's just not there, hence a guy falls out of a tree. Gee, why didn't he catch him? Why wasn't an angel under the tree? That I've heard stories that people fell and feels like they fell on a cushion. Why not that time? There was a kind of a funny video one time, advertisement, some kids working in a gas station or something. They had a plug that plugged in a soda pop dispenser, and a guy goes in to put a coin in the soda pop dispenser to get something out, and they unplugged it so it didn't work. And the guy puts his hand to his head, and then they plugged it back in. And in psychology class in college, this is the first thing they tell you about how to train a rat to press a bar to get a little pellet of food. And the rat quickly makes the association that every time he does a certain antic, put his hand to his head or do the jig, food comes out. And every time the guy did a certain action, they turn the soda machine back on and they're yucking it up, laughing. And while this guy's sitting here dancing in front of the soda machine to try to get the bottle to come out. That kind of thing is pretty funny. But see, when we as scientists look around and say, what drives this place? That's kind of what we end up doing. Oh, if I have my lucky rabbit's foot, then something will happen. You think so? If the stars are in a certain position, then something will happen. If I say a certain mumbo jumbo right before engaging the task, then I'll have fortune and luck. Gosh. But Yahweh set it up so that's what people will do. He's the guy pulling and pushing in the power cord to make the machine turn on, as it were. But then he told his people Israel, I'm the maker in heaven and earth. I'm the guy that runs justice. You walk in my ways, you get blessed. You don't walk in my ways, the curse comes on you. That's it. Pretty simple. But then he's going to stage everything so that people just won't believe it. Again, Psalms 33 gets into this. So for humans to figure out physics, how is the universe built? And then there's a whole question of quantum physics. And then you get into this concept of quantum entanglement. Dr. Emoto did that work, messages in water. Then there's the solfeggio tones with resonance and frequency. And you realize, gosh, if I play a certain note on a guitar, I'm going to feel better. My sanity will return, or broken bones will reset just by playing a note. Is there something to that? There's reason to believe there is something, but the question is how much. Atheists, or those who believe in evolution, which is to say there's no God, there's no Elohim, there's no maestro, master organizer. Everything just happens, is totally, it just happens. They're completely then self-centered, meaning if there's no beginning or cause or sustainer, it's just me. I live my life and then I die, so I might as well just go for everything I can. There's no moral authority. There's no judgment day to face. There's no recompensing of one's ways. That book that we talked about a couple months ago, Why Does the World Exist, by Jim Holt, addresses those matters. And then there's the Torah that very specifically tells us how it's built and why it's built and how it's going to work. But then there's the New Testament gospel, which seems different somehow than the Torah. And then there's people that say, you need a priest. We've talked about this before, where the job, the class office of a priest, the priest class, is that they are called dispensers of the graces. There's a phrase that I've heard mentioned, meaning if the laity, the ignorant masses, want to appeal to engage the seat of justice on high, they'll go to the priest and they'll tell him their concerns, and then he takes those concerns to the Almighty. He's the only one allowed entrance into the throne room, as it were, and then he receives the graces, comes back to the parishioners, the peasantry and dispenses the graces. So this job of a priest is critical and essential, not just in the, well, let's just say some churches use priests, but also a bunch of other religions use priests. And they're all accomplishing the same type of task. Hey, will you go ask your God if he'll bless me, please? I've had that requested of me before. The Greek mind, the Roman mind, and from what little I know, the Viking mind is that the gods living on Mount Olympus or wherever it might be essentially farm the humans. It's an interesting book called The Time Machine. Is it H.G. Wells, I think? Anyway, they had the Eloi living up on top, and they had the Morlocks living underneath the earth. It was way in the future. The word Eloi is the Hebrew word for Elohim. Eloi means my God. And mor is where you get the word mortal. Mort is the word for dead. So the dead peasants, humans that work, live underneath the ground. But at the end of the book was basically saying it was the Morlocks that were actually farming the Eloi, like a herd of sheep, and that night would come and they'd grab one and barbecue them and eat them underneath the earth. That's just the story. But what I'm saying is that these things are woven into human psyche. So then you get Hollywood movies. And back in the beginning days of the movies, like around the 1920s and 30s, bad guys wore black hats, good guys wore white hats, and you always hoped that the good guys would win. So they ran that gamut of good guys winning. But then somebody in Hollywood says, gosh, we've kind of used up that venue. Let's play out the storyline where the bad guys win. Woohoo! That ought to grab people's heart. So you had a whole bunch of movies where the bad guys would win. Like at the end of Jean de Florey, the end of that first of the two movies, it looks like if you have any sense of morality, it looks like the bad guys win, and you're just like, oh gosh. It doesn't resolve until like about the last 1 minute of the second movie. Just so you know, if you ever watch that, it'd be a long event, about a 5-6 hour to watch the 2 hour, but you got to watch Man of the Spring also for the sense of resolve. But the question is, even a bunch of the Psalms that David wrote, he's saying, why do the bad guys prosper? What does it take to drag Yahuwah's perspective, his eyes on the matter, and pull it into human affairs, contrary to all these other perspectives we were just talking about, except the Torah? Contrary to every single one of these other perspectives I just iterated, how do we get Yahuwah himself to tip the scales of justice, to balance the scales of justice? When I say tip, from being untipped to being level, because the scales of balance always have to be level. When John Wimber joined the Vineyard Christian Fellowship way back in many 40, 50 years ago, Jesus People movement was going on in the 1970s. Anyway, he comes to this church and he looks at the Bible and he hears stuff and he says, hey, when do we get to do the stuff? And people go like, what are you talking about? Do the stuff? He says, yeah, I mean, the Bible says that, Jesus was here and he said, you guys would be doing greater things than me, walking on water, raising the dead, healing the sick, commanding somebody like Diana King's husband, Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh heal you. You don't even have to be present. When do we get to do that stuff? By the way, that was a real command. It wasn't a theoretical thing. Yahweh Rapha, Mr. King. Why doesn't it seem to happen? When do we actually get to expel a demon and make him run in fear? Why does the kingdom of heaven look so powerless on the face of the earth? There was somebody I saw wrote, it was on the internet probably a year or two ago. I think it was maybe something that was written numerous pages, but the person made it very clear. Jesus Christ, King James Bible, said clearly, my kingdom is not of this world. And the fellow who was writing this article said, anybody who thinks that the promises, the power of the God of the Bible is to be manifest on the face of the earth, it's a lie. That's how you know it's wrong. That's how you know you have a false God. If you think that any of the promises in the Bible are for the here and now, you're in a cult, you're deluded, you're the heathen. Only those who say the kingdom of Jesus Christ is not of this world and all of our promises are in the by and by, in the future, some other dimension, only that's the truth. Okay, that's what he believes. Later, the poor get lifted, the rich get lowered. Don't worry about it. For now, like in Nigeria, Boko Haram lights people's houses on fire, chops them up with machetes. The Islamic forces seem to prevail over the Christian. So even though it looks in the mortal sphere, hopeless, helpless, heartless, but you can't say so because you know you have this promise in heaven. So the question is that true, or is that just another perspective like the deist, the predestined, the sorcery, the atheist, the quantum entanglement? What's the Torah say? What's he telling us? And I believe that Psalms 33 is about this matter. What it boils down to is faith versus logic, reality, what we see and engage, versus the expectation of what we hope. Are we just a leaf in the wind, as it were, subject to other invisible powers like the wind? Or are humans, especially humans of Israel that have determined to be Yahweh's people, actually the causal agents, the ones who do run, let's call it the quantum entanglement, where when you have a thought, something happens. Just a thought. You look, and your eyeballs observing can actually change the physical reality. That's quantum physics. That's what they're looking at is today's science. Your prayers have effect. So the question is, what are the rules of the game, and how is any of this known? So Psalm 33, verse 10, we'll look at that in verse 12 in a moment, but let me just say this. You see a bumper sticker that says, visualize world peace. So for me to say, if you are Israel, Yod Shin Resh Aleph Lamed Yisrael, the inheritor of the covenant through Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, iterated through Moshe that David was grabbing a hold of, if that's that Yeshua came to lock in the reality of it, if that's who you are, then what I'm saying is if you visualize world peace, you're going to have a greater effect than if some random person who believes in something that isn't true visualizes world peace. But the notion that humans are causal agents and can visualize world peace and that something will happen is what all these things are about. The difference is, if you think that the way this place is built is, whatever I think sends out an energy and it happens, or it affects with some kind of force something to happen otherwise than it would have happened, then as you engage these other things, is it prayer, is it sending angels and demons, is it requesting? But if you believe the Torah, where Yahuwah says this is the way it works, then you can engage with what he said very specifically. So you're not just a leaf in the wind. The humans walking in the Torah are actually like a big fan generating the wind, but the wind isn't of their own generating. It's Yahuwah that blows the wind. Even Yahusha said, you can see the effect of the wind, but you don't know where it's coming from or where it's going. We're going to get right into Psalms 33 here. I have no idea, Kurt, where we are in terms of time.
I mean, it's 40 minutes. You want to take a break and then start again?
Well, let me just say a couple other things.
Hey, Thomas, can you turn off your microphone, please? Thanks.
Okay, so just a couple other things. There's this idea that Yahweh says, I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. This is the great dream that he had that's mentioned numerous times in the Tanakh, which is basically the Old Testament. Just so people know that maybe they don't, the word Tanakh, TNK, the consonantal letters, is an acronym. It stands for Torah. That's the first 5 books of Moshe, what people call the instructions. The Nevaim, Nebim, Nun Bet, which is the word for prophets, and Ketubim. Ketuba is the writings. So the Tanakh is the Old Testament composed of 3 sections. All through there, Yahuwah talks about this vision that he has of, I'm going to be their Elohim, and they're going to be my people. And so that word for people is spelled Ayin Mem. So the interesting thing about this whole Paleo-Hebrew Archaeology study is that the spelling of the words is very particular, very on purpose, very intentional by he who invented the language, which would be Yahuwah himself. So why is his people Ayin Mem, and then makes it possessive as the Yod suffix? Well, if you look at the letter Ayin in Paleo, it's drawn as a circle, but not necessarily only a circle. It could be a circle, more of an ellipse with a stem, like a fruit with a stem coming out, and then the dot, like the pupil in the eye, is the seed in the middle of the fruit. And when he established the production of plants back there on day 3, he said to bring forth seeds that bear, trees that bear fruit with seeds within itself. It's more than just, yeah, that's what happened. There's a principle there. Stan Tenen of Miru, which I've mentioned before, though he doesn't necessarily believe any of this stuff, he was studying, and that phrase, spent 30 years investigating Genesis 1:1, that phrase about the tree bearing fruit whose seed is within itself to bear the next generation struck him as highly significant. A tree bearing fruit. And then you get these analogies, like in Galatians 5:22, what are the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, goodness, self-control. Those are aspects of your own heart. Well, if you look at the word Ayin Mem, memmings, is to take it into your own heart and ponder and meditate, contemplate, process your own personal reflections. If that's the mem, what's the ayin? Well, you've got the eyeball. The word ayin literally means weigh carefully, balance exactly, determine, calculate, look well to. The word ayin, spelled ayin yod nun, also means deep well, a spring of water, like the word Manon of the springs. The word Manon, mentioning that film again, mem nun, nun, manon. Well, mem nun is the laver, the pool of water, and then the nun is that which grows in it, like the fish growing in water that can jump out, of the baby in the womb that is birthed. Mem nun is where we get the word manna. It means, what's this? Where'd this come from? What's going on here? It's where we get the word for mono, or to a numerator of a mathematical fraction, one number over another. Numerator, denominator, mem nun is the numerator, and it's like it sets the pace. So a lot of these English and Greek, Latin words come right out of Hebrew. Manon of the spring. If the spring is the ayin, and how you ponder, how you meditate, how you contemplate is memming, then literally ayin mem yod, translated my people, where Yahuwah says, I'm going to be their Elohim, and they're going to be my people. It's not just a statement of fact or a condition describing the relationship, but it's also describing the state of being, of what his people are, what determines if you're his people. Do you care? Do you think? Do you ponder? Do you meditate on his stuff? And if ayin has to do with Day of Yom Kippur, that moed, then it has to do with covered sins, balance scales of justice. Mishpat is all about the letter ayin, which is the foundation of his throne. So for you to think about, what does it mean if Yahweh's kingdom was to manifest on the face of the earth? What would it look like? For you to even think that thought is ayin mem. And if he says, you're going to be my people, then we're going to be thinking those matters. We're going to be thinking about this stuff, taking it to heart. Mem, we're going to be thinking, if I pray the prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. What's his name? What does it mean to be hallowed? Kadosh Shemka. Our Father. How do we get you to show up and pay attention? How do we catch your ear, your heart, so that you turn your face, your eye upon us? That's what the Aaronic benediction is all about. Twice it says, Panav Aleka, turn his face upon you. And then there's that phrase, don't have any Elohim Achrim yoked to my face or in my face or what you think I look like. There in Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments, and Deuteronomy 5. How do we get him? Well, if we visualize his vision as ayin mem, and ayin is a fruit with a seed in it, and mem is a womb with a spark of life in it, or the mem, if you look at the, you might say the unfertilized egg of the ayin, of the mem, the unfertilized egg, like you might get from a chicken, there's no life in it. You can still eat it and have nutritional value. But the fertilized egg looks like the ayin, where you've got the outer shell with a dot in it. So you got this little dot of blood in a fertilized chicken egg. The womb, the mem, that's been fertilized. Well, Yahusha gave talks, parables about the sower of the seed. And he said the seed is the word of Elohim. So something about the Dabar Yahweh, the seed of life, is what Yahuwah said. And we talked before about the string theory, the quantum physics, the virgin birth being the wiggling strand of massless information is the Hebrew alphabet, which is the Ruach, the expanse from Aleph to Tav, which is the, you might say, the substance that builds quarks, that makes electrons, which makes elements. So the whole universe is based on Genesis 1, I think it's verse 2, where it says the Ruach of Elohim merechefet, wiggled, vibrated, fluctuated, oscillated. That's the wiggling strand of massless information, string theory. That's how all this place is put together. So that same wiggling information that fertilizes the womb is the picture of the ayin with the seed in it. Well, that's all kind of a female job function. And when Yahuwah says that Israel is his woman, his betrothed, he also said that Israel is his firstborn son, and he likens Israel to a daughter, in fact, two, Ephraim and Yehuda, there in Jeremiah 3 and 4. But picture this. If the father wants a family, he's got to have his wife get pregnant, or else there's no future. Does Yahweh need his people Israel to take to heart his stuff? If he's built the whole universe, as a fractal expression of the fractal model, the code of the alphabet, that all these words and parables are pictures of, then if Israel doesn't become fertilized with his word, his seed, his future is not going to happen. And yet, the word Nacha, Nun, Het, Lamed means heritage. Israel is the heritage of Yahweh. I think we talked about that maybe last week, or maybe it's in this week coming up here. The point is, if you just look at doctrine and you look at teaching and you look at dogma and you look at myth and fable and movies and stained glass windows, you're going to miss what's written in the Hebrew. And what the Hebrew seems to say is that Yahuwah wants his people reading his word, taking it to heart, pondering it, nurturing, gestating, incubating his ideas based on these 22 letters in order for the future to happen, and pondering that future as he said it. That's what causes things to happen. But it's not just a random hope like visualize world peace, or as somebody made a joke out of it, yeah, world peas, like putting peas in a blender and whirling them around. Ha ha, yeah, play on words. No, this is a play on words for what Yahweh said. How do you become impregnated by his word? Yeshua said in the parable of the sower, if it falls on good soil and you take his word in and you have hope and expectation, believing that what he said is not only true, but vital, vibrant, with life. Everything else is dead. Everything else is a fantasy. Nothing else is going to spark to life. Only his words have life. Everything else is a default appearance of victory. Only his words will bring forth victory, because Zadikah is not just the word righteousness, it also means victory and deliverance and salvation. It's a synonym with Shinayan, Shah, as in Yahusha. Zadikah is not just righteousness. It's victory, deliverance, and salvation for the righteous. And if you look at it that way, Psalms 33 reads differently, which we're going to do in just a moment. But what I'm saying is then, for Israel to be his woman is to be his womb of development. So for us to be his people walking the face of this earth, believing and trusting and reading and hoping, is not just a joyride until we get to heaven where it really happens. It's an absolutely necessary, integral piece of the puzzle of what is going on in this cosmos, universe, face of the earth. We had a talk the other day with Mountain Air 7 last week where Fred was talking about 100 years ago, you buy a Rolls Royce, you hop in and you take it for a spin. You don't think about adding oil. You don't think about tuning it up. You just got it off the showroom floor. You take the thing for a drive and you feel the wind in your hair and you just enjoy the experience. That's what Adam and Hua were supposed to be doing. Just start living. There was no law written on tables of stone. He did say don't eat of that fruit of that one tree. Everything else was just in their heart to have the experience of a human being. Jeremiah 31 says that's what we're going back to. Him writing his laws, his ways, his identity in our inner parts and on our hearts, two places, as Stu pointed out. That's I and Mem. The word I and Mem, my people, to be fertilized in your inward part with his seed, his word, and nurture it to full expression of life that he was hoping for, and his people doing that is Israel. And that's his heritage. That's his future, that we are the participant, you might say the brokers of Yahweh's future. What a concept. What an incredible concept. Anyway, well, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll get right into looking in detail